Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest in the ongoing saga from our unelected Brexit minister as he goes from saying that the deal he negotiated was marvellous to the deal he negotiated was rubbish and he didn't know what he was doing to the deal he negotiated should never have been signed in the first place. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this is another aspect of Brexit where it's tricky to discern whether those in charge of it are mad or just pretending to be mad. You would imagine from the rhetoric coming from David Frost and the Conservatives this week that they are throwing the kitchen sink at justifications to unilaterally renege on an international treaty. If you take them at their word, if you take them at face value, it looks like they're going to do it, they're going to pull out of it, and they're just trying to get enough people convinced that it's the right thing to do. The Brexit withdrawal agreement, specifically the Northern Ireland Protocol part of it, everything they're saying is talking about it. We need to destroy this thing, not work on it, not discuss ways to make it better, get rid of it, remove it. And of course, if you remove the Northern Ireland Protocol, not much remains of the withdrawal agreement in general, if indeed anything. So in 2019, David Frost negotiated this withdrawal agreement with the EU on behalf of Boris Johnson that removed the backstop in favour of a customs border inside the UK. Boris Johnson seized on it as a way of getting the UK out of the EU, not because it was a palatable solution to enough people, but because it was that most perfect of conservative policies, something that meant different things to different people and would not deliver what any of them thought it would. To the general public, it represented the supposedly impossible EU deal. Remember, the media had been building up to this, going, oh, it's impossible. And people could see the fact that Theresa May's attempts at the withdrawal agreement had completely failed. And it was like, oh, it's impossible to get a deal. And then all of a sudden the impossible was done. Oh, they've got a deal. Isn't Boris Johnson marvellous? And it satisfies all sides. So much so that 43% of voters, or at least 43% of the people who did vote, gave the Conservatives 100% of the power on the back of it. To the majority of Conservative MPs, represented something different. It was a deal that would allow Britain to diverge from EU rules and standards without the cliff edge of a no-deal Brexit. So they voted for it. For the hardline ERG, it was something completely different. It was a way to pretend that it allowed us to diverge from EU rules and standards without the cliff edge of a no-deal, but something that Johnson could just renege on when it was too late to see what they were up to, and indeed he'd given them private assurances that he would. Now, since September, the government have been trying to pull out of their obligations regarding the protocol in a serious series of acts of bad faith. In the same month, David Frost tweeted that the protocol represented a negotiated, careful balance to preserve peace in Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement. Now, that's important. Last September, even as he was trying to start making the case to renege on the protocol, Frost said that he negotiated it carefully to preserve peace in Northern Ireland. In December, when trumpeting his trade and cooperation deal, he said, all choices are in our hands as a country and it's now up to us to decide how we use them and how we go forward in the future. Now, this statement is not compatible either with claiming that his deals were crap or that we conceded any power in striking them. Now, fast forward to May 2021, and he is now saying that his deal threatens peace in Northern Ireland, that it isn't consistent with the Good Friday Agreement, and, get this, that it should never have been signed in the first place. David Frost has said this week that the UK government signed the deal and the protocol with the EU under what he calls parliamentary duress. In other words, it's not the agreement that they wanted or could have got, but Parliament forced their hand. Except, of course, this is absolute tosh. Now, it is true that when Frost was negotiating the protocol, the parliamentary arithmetic was of a majority of MPs moving towards the idea of just issuing another referendum on leaving the EU, and that they would never have voted in favour of a hard Brexit, and certainly not in favour of a no-deal Brexit. But although the protocol was negotiated at this time, it was not signed at this time. David Frost is talking about the signing of it. It was signed months later after Boris Johnson had won an 80-seat majority in a general election And more than that, where he won an 80-seat majority of Tory MPs who all agreed to back Boris Johnson's Brexit plan. Whatever he did with Brexit, they had to back it. Any Conservative who would not sign him that blank cheque would not get to be the Conservative candidate. All there was to it. As a result, he purged the entire Parliamentary party of anyone who would not publicly commit to a hard Brexit. When he won that general election, Boris Johnson immediately started changing the bill that had been passing through Parliament to leave the EU. He ripped out safeguards and standards and rights, and that like there was no tomorrow. He could have reopened negotiations on the protocol as well. Yes, the EU might well have said no. He could have dropped it altogether and left the EU without a deal, which is what some are saying we should have done. He had the power to do this because at this point he had a tame Parliament. These are the facts of the matter. David Frost, once again acting on behalf of Boris Johnson, is trying to rewrite history, trying to blame the last Parliament for something that was done by the current Parliament. The last Parliament, had that remained in place, we would have had another referendum by now. We wouldn't have left the EU and this would all be done. Brexit actually would have been done. So what he's trying to do is blame the situation on the government not having a majority when they had an 80-seat majority at the time the deal was signed. It's just another example of Brexiteers refusing to accept the consequences of their actions. Now, I do not know which ones genuinely are accepting it because they're that thick and ignorant, they just think it's someone else's fault, or which ones are just pretending it's someone else's fault. They're just pretending not to accept the consequences because the public are watching. What I do know is that they are raising the stakes sky high. Now, I talked previously this week about how David Frost had been meeting with unionist paramilitary, and rather than working to discuss a way forward, rather than saying, look, we've got this situation, this is what we need to do, this is what we're trying to do, he just seems to have placated them by agreeing, you're totally right, it's all the EU's fault, and we should absolutely tell them to stuff their protocol, which only adds credence to an already insane and frankly unworkable plan. We cannot just drop the protocol. That is not happening. That cannot happen. But then it got even worse because leaders of the paramilitary groups, can't say the word today, were then invited to a parliamentary committee meeting as supposed experts in dealing with the customs problems. Oh, we've got these customs problems. We really don't know what we're doing. What should we do? I know, let's invite a load of terrorists. They know how to deal with this. And what happened? They promptly threatened violence in Northern Ireland. I mean, who could have seen that? As the government raised tensions in Northern Ireland to hide the bits of their Brexit mess that are poking out from behind their COVID smokescreen, they invite violent people to talk on the record to MPs and they use the event to promote violence. This statement is now on record. This statement has been said to a parliamentary committee. There are certainly certain circumstances where violence is the only tool you have left. Now, the problem with rewriting history is that you are deliberately fostering a condition whereby people have a different grounding in fact. See, agreements can be difficult enough anyway when both sides want something very different. But in many agreements, like international agreements, for example, or intranational agreements, if both sides at least have a good grounding in reality, they understand what is realistic and they just want different things, you can get agreement. It can be difficult, but you can get agreement. But when both sides are grounded in a different reality, that's when anger erupts. Because each side sees the other as either liars or wrong, because they think to themselves, well, they're saying this thing, but I know that's not right because I know that this is a fact, not a matter of opinion, a fact. But they're saying something as if that's not a fact. So they must be lying or they must be wrong. Maybe they're wrong. I need to convince them they're not being convinced that they're wrong. This is really frustrating. Or they're too intelligent to not understand my argument. Therefore, they must be lying. Well, that makes me angry. And that's how Brexit has always been and how it always will be. Because when Brexit is no longer that, when Brexit cannot convince large groups of people that the moon is made of cheese, Brexit loses its power. It is bad for the UK. The whole of the UK, not just bits of it. It's bad for everyone. It's bad for those immediately around the UK. It's so bad that neither the government that delivered it nor the newspapers that campaigned for it even bother to put lipstick on the pig anymore. The day before Brexit, everything was going to be marvellous. Everything was going to be marvellous. The day of Brexit, dreadful. The devastating impacts were always going to be obvious from the start, even suppressed as they are by the pandemic. They were always going to have to say that it was someone else's fault. We were always going to shift from Brexit's brilliant, let's go through with it, to Brexit having happened, like, right, someone else's fault. Oh, this isn't our fault. But the problem is that this strategy just makes things worse. And I don't know where this is going, but every time there is a new development, it seems to me that it becomes more and more difficult for Boris Johnson and his government to get behind the protocol without losing face. Because that's the binary situation we have now. They need to make because there is no alternative. If there was an alternative, we would have negotiated the alternative. David Frost says he doesn't actually understand the consequences of it. I don't believe that. He understood the consequences perfectly well. There is no alternative to the protocol, or we would have come up with one. I'm not saying David Frost is a negotiating genius, but we did nonetheless have the best legal minds in both the EU and the UK in on this for years. And that was the best we could come up with. But at the same time, you can't actually just drop it, because then international pariah. But the thing is, not getting behind the protocol, I mean, that's a non-starter. Getting behind it will, at this point, you would think, be politically impossible. I mean, they agreed to it, they signed to it, despite all of our warnings about it. Now they say they didn't understand what even I knew at the time, and still they're allowed to be in charge of the paths we take. I mean, that's not just depressing, that's pretty dangerous. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.